G'day Reefers, I'm Cam the Fish Guy and you're watching Gallery Aquatica TV. One of the questions we get asked about the most is how to move a fish tank, how to relocate a tank, a fully established tank from one location to the next. So we're here at Gallery Aquatica HQ, we're packing the ute ready for a relocation and it's an absolutely stinking hot day. Okay, so we've just arrived on site for our Red Sea Reefer relocation, and I'll just show you some of the things that we've brought with us to make this job easier. It's really important that we have everything that we need, and I like to bring extra of everything, extra boxes, extra buckets, extra nets. So I'll show you what we've got. First of all, we've got lots of water if we need it. There's 700 litres there. The tank's only 350 litres, but it's always better to have more than not enough. We've got lots of hoses, so we've got probably 30-40 metres worth of hoses if we need. We've got some extra things, extra pumps. Over here we've got heaps of space. Most importantly, it's really important to have lots of space so we can really spread out the tank if we need to. We've got some empty drums and we'll use these to fill with water from the tank so that we can keep as much of the water as possible. Now the best thing about today's relocation is we've got two vehicles, so we've got heaps of space. So let's have a look at the other ute and we'll see what's in that one. So in this ute we've got 3 of these large barrels, and each barrel has a battery operated air pump. So this is going to allow us to keep the water in the barrels well oxygenated. Now it's such a hot day here today in Brisbane that I am worried about the temperature of the water in the barrels, so keeping them well oxygenated is even more important. We've got foam boxes, we've got heaps of those, we've got some nets, more hoses, lots of towels. Very important when you're doing a relocation to have lots of towels so that you don't make a mess and spill salt water and stuff all over the client's carpet. So this is everything that we've got today. The first thing we'll do is get this up to the tank, spread ourselves out and start to strip down the tank ready for relocation. Let's get to it. Okay reefers, so we've come up to the tank that we're going to relocate and we're just sort of sussing it out. We're making sure that we have got everything that we need, and we've set up a little bit of a base camp. So we've got our towels all spread out to minimise the mess. Our barrels are ready to go. We've got our nets, dustpan and brush for the sand. Everything is ready to go. This is always the scary part though. We're going to have a look in the cabinet to see exactly what we're dealing with here. And this can be the hard part. Okay. And just as I feared, we've got a lot of apex gear. We've got a dosing pump which looks a little bit like it's going to be a little bit difficult to remove. We've got controllers for wave makers and probably for 3 wave makers they are. The plumbing has also been modified, so this will complicate things even more. The doser being on a rack will also have to come out. So there's a few things here that it's going to make the job a little bit more difficult, but I think that we've got everything that we need, and luckily there's 2 of us on the job today, so we should be right. And we'll start by taking out the livestock and putting that into the barrels. All right, here we go. So we have an automatic top-up system. So the first thing I'll have to do will be to disable that so we don't start to feed fresh water into the system. Here we go. Nice and easy. It's a twins, so I'll just pull out the cable. That's turned that off. So now we can start taking water out. might make the sump run dry. So I'm going to turn off the return pump. Put this over here. Okay. Alright, so it's a Vectra M1 by the looks of it. Okay, this will be it. Alright, return pump is off. We've got 2 wave makers. Important that we remember to turn those off, so I'll turn those off now as well. This is one of the great things about the Ecotech. Very easy to turn it off. Also the controls are labelled so we know. There's one, there's a second. So our water flow is off. We can continue to drain more out of the tank. So what I'm doing now is I'm just making a hole in the lid so that I can feed the air pump and the stone through, so that when we turn on our air pump, we've got bubbles. So this will keep the water well and truly oxygenated and annoy us with the noise. So there's so many components in here. The only way to really go about this is just to do the easiest ones first. So I'm going to take out the heater, I'll take out the skimmer, I'll disconnect the reactor, take out the doser. You know, lots of individual things, and looking at it like now, it looks like a massive challenge, but all I can do is just one thing at a time and slowly get through it. But I'll do the heater first, follow through the cord. So I've just found what I thought was another normal power board, but it's the Apex. So I'm going to have to remember exactly which appliance goes into which port on the Apex. So this is the heater that I'm pulling out now, and I've just worked out that it's this one here. Yep, that's it. All right, so the heater is on the second on the top. Look at how many cables there are in here. Incredible. So I'm putting all of the dosing pump, the pump itself and the vessels into this one box to keep it all together. So we've got a Kamoa X4, which has a cable for the temperature. It also has the liquid sensing cables as well, so that you know how much solution you have in your doses. It's important we don't have these fall over in transit. So I'm still taking out individual components from this sump. Taking out the automatic top up, taking out the dosing pump, and now I'm going to take out the reactor and the skimmer. So I'm just draining this of water. We try to minimise the amount of water that sort of messes up the buckets and the boxes. It's taking a while. Alright, there we go. So that's a DIY Aquatica reactor. Pretty cool. So looking at this Vectra, probably needs a bit of a clean out. So we'll clean that before we put it back in when we set the tank back up again. Just running to a soft plastic tubing. I might actually take this out next, it'll be easier. At least we know exactly which one the Vectra is because it's marked on the controller. So with such a large number of components on this system, it's very important that we don't mix up any of the power supplies, any of the cables, any of the controllers. So what we're going to do is try and put them as neatly as possible into individual bags. And this way, hopefully, it'll be easier when we're setting this tank back up again. So this is the automatic top up. Also, being in the bags, it's going to reduce the chance that any water is going to get into the sensitive electrical equipment. So we've just been filling the dry box. It has the dosing pump, the automatic top up, that sort of thing. This is our wet box. And so the items we put in here all should be able to tolerate at least a small amount of water. So we've got the reactor pump, the reactor itself, the automatic top-up pump. We'll put the heater in here. We'll put the wet side of the wave makers in here. The dry side of the wave makers will be in the dry box. But just keeping them, the wet stuff separate from the dry stuff is really important in keeping everything safe whilst in transit from this location to the next. So we've got a Deltec protein skimmer, and often what happens when people know that they're about to move house, often the general maintenance of the aquarium kind of gets you know, left behind a little bit, and people get a little bit lazy. And you can see this skimmer, it's really dirty. So this big clean out and relocation is going to be a good opportunity for us to give the skimmer a really good clean, so that when we set it back up again, it'll be working at its maximum efficiency. Definitely needs a clean. Alright, so we're finally having a win with the cables and all the components in the sump. We've got almost everything out. I've left some of the plumbing and some of the Apex equipment in place. We're probably going to have to take some more out, but I'll leave it like this for now. So the next job I have to do is remove as much water as possible from the sump. So I'm going to use a hose. I'm going to drain this out. I'll use a siphon hose. And I'm going to try and remove as much of the detritus as possible, which will mean that when we fill the tank back up again, there won't be as much clouding of the water. So I'll get my siphon hose, which should be over here. So it's quite incredible when you start to take a tank apart, how much space you need. We've almost entirely filled this room just with all the different pumps and buckets and things that we need. Alright, so starting a siphon, low down, I put the hose obviously into the sump. I make sure that part of the hose is low in the bucket so that I can, with a very quick, short, sharp suck, get the water flowing into the bucket. Alright, so that's working. And now with the detritus. So this is water that we're going to discard. As you saw downstairs, we have heaps of extra water, so it won't hurt for us to throw a bit out. There's a frag rack in here. This is very typical of sumps to have a layer of detritus, but good filter maintenance will reduce the amount of this muck. It can leach phosphate back into the tank and basically just is not ideal, but this is why we're cleaning it out. And we have a blenny. Oh, here we go. Got him. Alright. Can you take the rock please, Ryan? Yep. Carefully. Yep. Ensure we don't drop it on the glass. Yep. Alright. Which buckets are you putting the fish in? This one here? That one's got the most water, yeah. Alright. Cool. We'll turn this air pump on. Alright, can you take this rock? So I want to get the mandarin fish out next because they're always vulnerable to having a rock placed on them because they're such a slow moving fish. Alright, he's just down here, swam straight into the net. Beautiful little fish. So we'll put him in the barrel. So we've got a rabbit fish. Now rabbit fish have got slightly venomous dorsal spines, so you have to be very careful when you're handling them. This one tried to have a go at Ryan. Nice big sail fin tank. Des Jardini, I think. So we've got two orange stripe or gold stripe Premners. One, there's the boy. Bi-colour angel. And a pajama cardinal. It's just caught in the net. Come on, there we go. Before we disturb the sand too much, we're going to take as much of this water as possible and we're going to fill these drums, the empty drums up. We've got rats under the sand and we've got some sand-sifting sea stars. But before we mess up the water, we've got to get as much of it out as possible, because the key to having success with this tank relocation is to keep as much of this old water as possible. So usually we'd use a large hose and drain the bulk of the water straight out into the toilet or down a drain or somewhere like that. But this time we're just going to use buckets. It's not a huge tank and we're probably only going to ditch about maybe 100 litres or so. We've already filled 4 drums plus our barrels, so we're keeping enough of the water that we should be okay to keep the biological stability of the system happening. But we want to drain all the way down to the bottom so that we only have to take out the sand and maybe a little bit of water with the dustpans. Very importantly, having an overflow, we've drained out the overflow into this section here. We should have most of the water out. I'll grab that other bucket. Can you change that across? Yeah. So we're almost at the point where we'll be able to start taking things down to the ute and loading up. We know that there's a wrasse in this tank and we haven't taken it out with the nets. So my suspicion is that it's under the sand. So I'm going to just dig through and see if we can find this wrasse. Well, there's a sand-sifting sea star. There we go. Hey, keep passing that. So it's a chorus wrasse. Bit of a classic for diving under the sand when there's nets in the tank. Alright, we better put that pump back on. Oh, another sand sifter. Actually, there were a few, so we'll check. There's RE snail too. Looks empty though. Corellamore. It's definitely important to make sure that we get all the creatures out of the tank before we put the tank on the ute in the sun. Yeah, that's it. Alright, so we're at the point where we're taking the plumbing out. Now, this tank has actually got customized plumbing. This is the return line. I've taken off this bottom section, and now I've started to unscrew the return line, and I'm just removing it from here, and also the 2 drainage lines. So you have to twist the bottom section of the bulkhead off, and then these will come out. So you can see how much growth there is on these drainage lines. So we'll give them a bit of a clean before we put them back in. That should be it. And now that we've got these drainage lines out, we're going to use our dustpans to remove the sand, and we can start to load all of this up on the ute. now we've got the sump out of the cabinet, we've got the perfect opportunity to drain the last of the water out. Because the sump was previously down low, it makes it very difficult to get any water out, but up here it's a lot better. Also, this will allow us to tilt the sump so that we can get every last drop out, hopefully. So we've arrived at the second location. As you can see, we have the tank and the cabinet all packed up. We're about to unload that. We've also got all of the boxes and the equipment on the back of the trailer. We chose to put the tank and the cabinet on the ute. The mat's a little bit safer and just a better way for it to travel. But everything's intact, so now we just have to bring it all inside and set it back up again. So let's get to it. The mat will slide out with the tank, so at no point do we have to worry about the glass coming in contact with the steel of the tailgate. Get these fish into the aircon ASAP. So we're cleaning up the plumbing. This isn't normally part of the service, but it is particularly bad. You can see the gunk in here. So we're just giving a bit of a clean off. It is important, however, that the thread on the plumbing is clean. If you've got little bits of grit and dirt and sand in and around the O-ring, when you put it back into position, it may not seal properly. So the most important thing for us is getting the tank well and truly sealed so that we can walk away confident that there will be no leaks. So I'm cleaning this up here for that reason. Still looks like a bit of a dirty sump, but compared to what it was like before, it's a million times better. We might clean the Dacron or something, but it's the amount of bacterial silt we pulled out of this, it's going to be 10 times better than it was. So we're tipping the sand into the tank, but of course the sand is settled in the bucket and it's really difficult to get out. We also have to do it in a way that we don't do any damage to the tank. So we've done the plumbing and it should be all secure. We're going to test it with some water. This is the water that we've kept from the previous tank. We've got 80 litres here, plus what's in the barrels. So the easiest way to put water into the tank from a drum is to first decant it into a bucket. It can be very difficult to lift a drum into a position that it fills directly into the tank, and typically if you try and do that, you'll get splash slugging over the back of the tank, making a mess. So first of all into the bucket, and then into the tank. Because we haven't rinsed the sand, the water is going to be very dirty. However, we'll get the skimmer working and we'll put in the new water and it'll be clear enough for the fish in probably about half an hour, I reckon. So we've got the tank filled up. Can't see any leaks from any of the drainage lines, but the last test is going to be the return pump. So I'll hit go on the Vectra M1 and we'll see what happens. Go. Oh, there we go. So we're checking for leaks on this line here and through the chiller as well. We might have a small leak on the chiller valve. You see there's a little bit of water pooling there. I'll dry that off and I'll test it to see if this is the case, but it might be the seal underneath that, so I'll have to find out about that, but otherwise it's okay. So we're almost finished our relocation. We have the tank set up with water. The plumbing is all good, there's no leaks. The skimmer is working. We've got the cup off at the moment because we've stirred up the sand and just disturbed the water and rock. It's over skimming a little bit. So we'll put that on just before we leave. The fish have been staging. They've been staging into the new water. We ended up using a lot more water than I was planning. We actually used about probably 3/4 of the volume in the tank. And so we've just been staging the fish so that they're used to the new water. So we're right at the point of putting the fish into the tank. We have 2 buckets of fish. These are the big guys. We started staging them first. Sailfin tang. Rabbit fish. So we expect them to stress out a little bit for the next half hour or maybe even the next day or 2, but they'll be fine. The water they've gone into is practically the same as in the bucket. All the gear is there, so really we just have to pack up and head off, and I think that we can call this a job well done. Thanks for watching Gallery Aquatica TV. There's our Red Sea relocation. So that's our video for today. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe as well. We'll be putting out videos every week showing a new tank with new products. There's going to be lots in all the videos. I'm Cam the Fish Guy, and keep on reefing.